Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Zimaborski. I'm a 27-year reporter in the Florida Keys, and we're here today to talk about sea level rise and climate change in Marathon, the city of Marathon, which is in the heart of the Keys. The Keys are basically from Key Largo in the north to Key West in the south, as we like to call it, and Marathon is right in the middle, and that's about mile marker 50 at its center. And we're going to talk with the city manager, George Garrett, and the planning director, Brian Shea. So let's find out who they are. George, how about you? Why don't you tell us how long you've been with Marathon and some of your titles?
Good morning, Jill. This is George Garrett, and I am currently the city manager for the city of Marathon. I came to the Keys in 1984. I was doing endangered species research then, working with my office mate at the time. And I ended up staying in the Keys and working for what was then the Department of Natural Resources to develop what would have been the state equivalent of what is now the National Marine Sanctuary. And what the state calls that is an aquatic reserve, but it would have run essentially for all of the area of the current sanctuary, except only within state waters. I then started working for the county as a biologist. I became the director of environmental resources with the county almost immediately. That was 1986. I became the director of marine resources for the county with the inception of the National Marine Sanctuary in 90. I think I actually became the director in 91. And I was the director of marine resources and then GIS services as well through 2007. I wrote pieces of the sanctuary management plan. I wrote pieces of the county's comprehensive plan, which components that kind of interlace between that and the sanctuary. Coming into the years roughly 2000, I was the project manager for the wastewater master plan for the Keys, the stormwater master plan for the Keys, and the canal restoration master plan for the Keys. And did a lot of sort of marine public works related stuff associated with the sanctuary. And that was, I think, the county, and I was obviously director at the time, put in something on the order of 1,200 channel markers throughout the Keys. And finally, came to the city of Marathon as a planner and then ultimately the director of planning in late 2007. I've been the assistant city manager from 15 to 18 and became the city manager. Well, I was also the planning director in all that time frame, and then became the city manager a little over a year ago, December of 2020. And so there I am.
There you are. You have quite the history. Yeah. Quite the history in government and with Marathon. And how about you, Brian?
I moved to the Keys in March of 2014. I started working under George as a planner and then progressed up to senior planner and now planning director.
So what is it about Marathon that makes you stay? What do you think, George? What's so
me
about Marathon?
Oh, you're back to me. Well,
yeah, what we'll be back.
No, there's well, to an extent, it's loyalty, when it really gets down to it, but that's only part of it, obviously. I think Marathon has a great past and a great future. When incorporation was suggested, as it had been in Islamorada, back in the late 90s. I was a county employee. I thought some of the motives, if you will, at the time were probably genuine. I think they certainly, if you look backwards, were genuine. I'm sure that all of them were truthful back in the 90s, but it's one of those things that I think ultimately, we are where we are today. The fact that the village or the city of Marathon have become cities has been a benefit to the areas that they serve, simply because regardless of how many people we might have said we were going to employ and how we were going to get more efficient than the county and all of these things that were proclaimed at the time when incorporation was occurring. You know, the fact is you need, once you start taking on those responsibilities as a city, you're not just going to have a minimal staff. You actually have to serve the public that you serve. And, you know, all of a sudden, all of the, you know, you become the focus of the interests of the community, and you've got to actually create the means to accomplish the goals that the community has. And I think the city of Marathon really is a wonderful place. It's got great assets. It's not Key West in the sense that it doesn't have all the kind of the attractions and, you know, the glitz and glitter, but it has a lot of things going for it in terms of entertainment. You can certainly do all the things on land between Pigeon Key and Crane Point Hammock and the aquarium encounters and dolphin research, et cetera. So those are good land-based things. And we've got a great opportunity for fishing and diving. So, and I think we've had a forward attitude about, you know, the development potential of the city of Marathon, because very different than the rest of the Keys. The portions of Marathon that are developing are portions that have been developed for years and they're now redeveloping. So the impacts to resources, to water quality, to the things that we worry about in the Keys have not as been potential, or have not been as potentially great as they could have been in other areas of the Keys, like the lower Keys or something like that. You're not destroying habitat to create building, and it's mostly redevelopment. And so I think we've really just been able to keep the goal of redeveloping sustainably. I think, you know, you're going to get into the questions of what are we doing with sea level rise and climate change. I mean, honestly, the development we're seeing is redevelopment that, at least in some part, has that in mind.
And along that lines, I found a newspaper from 2019 after the Southeast Florida Regional Compact, and I know you were there, the Regional Compact on Climate Change in Key West. And it said, you know, in the article that Marathon sea level rise is predicted to be 6 to 10 inches in the next 8 years and 14 to 16 inches by 2060. So given we think the sea level rise is coming, what is Marathon doing to adapt, or, you know, or what's it doing to adapt, I guess?
Brian, you can hit it.
Quite a bit. So just to give a general overall, so first example would be Cocoa Plum. That was our first adaptation area action plan. So that catered as a perfect choice because it hit all of the criteria we were looking to protect. It had the environmental aspects of the beach and salt ponds. It had the aspects for the infrastructure of the roads. It has the aspect for the critical infrastructure for the sewer that's on Cocoa Plum. It also pertained to the existing housing and affordable housing as well. So just that one particular island as part of Marathon was our focus point for that main project. So that was done through Sea Grant Florida and Department of Environmental Protection grant. That was completed 2021.
Wow.
So from that, we then are working forward, and we received funding actually recently to do the rest of the entire city of Marathon through that grant.
And that was through Sea Grant? Through Sea Grant or through the state, or is it part of?
It was Department of Environmental Protection.
Okay.
With Sea Grant.
And how much money did Marathon receive for this project, roughly? I don't
remember off the top of my head.
I thought it was around 2.4 million, but that's, you know, I could be wrong on that. So, and then,
you know, Jill, I think, and I honestly don't remember the number either. It's certainly in those numbers in that range. You know, between resiliency money and so on that the state is generally making available throughout the state, you know, we're certainly attempting to get our piece of it. And you also have stewardship to some degree. whether it's specifically focused on that or not, we can certainly use it for, some components towards that effort. And then we have things coming like ARPA. Can we necessarily use ARPA directly for sea level rise projects? Less so, but I think more and more ARPA, which came out of the COVID pandemic, is beginning to loosen up and allow us things like infrastructure projects to occur where you can identify that the purposes of those projects are possible or become possible because of loss of revenues due to the downturn as a result of the COVID pandemic. So
what does ARPA stand for? Do you know?
I don't remember.
I know, right? We just refer to it as ARPA now. But
Oh,
basically it's COVID funds. So yeah.
The American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for instance, we're now replacing a bridge on Cocoa Plum using those funds.
Okay.
So, and honestly, when ARPA first came out, that wouldn't have been possible. I think they've recognized that that frankly, some of the restraints or constraints that they placed on ARPA early on really wouldn't allow you to use them if you were still surviving, if you will, as a community. So I think they've really loosened that up so it could logically be used for things like infrastructure projects, and we will do that. Whether all sea level rise related or climate change related or not. I mean, we're certainly going to put a lot of it in infrastructure.
Have you all done anything related to raising roads or elevating homes? Where does that stand?
So right now we are coordinating with the county and the other municipalities. We are doing the LiDAR. So the county did their LiDAR and now everyone else is combining to do our LiDAR. We actually have that interlocal agreement on our next council meeting, and so does the county. So that project will move forward. Then planning ahead already for next year's budget and grant application cycle, we submitted with the county for the road elevation planning for all municipalities. So we're hoping to keep expanding each step along the way.
Is there a specific area in Marathon? I was reading about an area between like 39th and 42 streets, I guess, in the south end, I believe, that traditionally floods. Is that a place y'all are worried about?
Yes, and we have addressed part of that. We installed a pump station on site, so that's helped move that water out back to sea. We have a few other locations where the roads are low lying, and those will have to be elevated as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I as we watch this, what's happening, and of course Key West has had sea level rise issues going back, to the late 90s, because I was working on the wastewater master plan for the Keys. The engineer I was working with was doing a lot of work for Key West at the time to deal with some of their stormwater issues, and they were already beginning to do things to pump against tide, which is what ends up happening in low lying areas. You basically start sealing your system so that you can pump against tide. You're actually going to have to use energy to pump water that's coming up through your storm grates and all that sort of stuff back down. And that's what Brian referred to on the the 39th Street area, and putting in a pump station. I mean, literally what we did there was we went in and took out perforated pipe where you would have had a passive stormwater system. We took that pipe out, we capped it essentially so it's sealed now, and then your pump, it still collects water, but now we're beginning to pump against the tides. And what's that mean? It means that for that very small project and for the things that we're going to have to deal with in the future, that the effort to manage against sea level rise and climate change is simply going to cost money. We can no longer do passive projects. We're going to have to do active projects that cost energy and take machinery that you simply wouldn't have had to use in the past. And to add to what Brian was saying about some of the things, I mean, we focused on Cocoa Plum because that is a low-lying area. It's not one of the worst. Probably down near the beach, Sombrero Beach, when we get these king high tides, if you go look at our storm drains, people go, oh, they're plugged up. No, this is very porous geology, and the water comes back up through the ground, and then it comes back up through our stormwater systems, and it starts ponding around, our collection points. And so you start seeing puddles around our stormwater grates. In the long run, we're probably going to have to start doing what we've done, down on that 39th to 42nd Street area. For those areas. And 92nd Street is probably the one place that I can say is sort of like the Key Largo issues that you alluded to at the start of your conversation. It faces the east, so it's on it. The entire length of the outer part of 92nd Street is exposed on one side to the ocean.
Okay.
And so you get high tides and wind working against you, and that street will sometimes be 2 feet underwater.
Oh, wow.
And but that's really comparatively the only place where we have those sort of problems. And we have a potential solution there if the homeowners will end up working with us. The other areas are going to be maybe a little bit like what we did down on 39th to 42nd, where we're going to start sealing our stormwater systems and putting mechanical devices in to pump against tide when we have high tides.
I read about at the Sombrero Beach area that you all had preserved some, I think it was wells under the streets when there was some work being done, and because you foresaw the option of utilizing those spaces to help pump out water, kind of like it sounds like maybe that you did in the southern part of Marathon. Is that, when was that done?
That one actually eludes me. Trying to remember. I mean, I think where we've done a number of projects to, and I'm maybe not quite hitting the point, but we've done a number of projects, or we're looking at projects where we can continue to preserve wetlands where we can, let wetlands both be a buffer against sea level rise, to give us protection against storms. There's not a lot of opportunity there, but I think on the other hand, the more habitat we can get, whether it's mangroves, which protect shorelines, or even just, hammock areas that are higher ground areas that just give us some space between the shoreline and our residences. Those are going to be some of the benefits that accrue to having done that in the past, where we can protect ourselves, putting in culverts that connect wetlands, doing things at the end of canals to improve circulation and things like that. Don't necessarily go to sea level rise, but they go to protecting our shorelines.
Sure. And what about cost? The million-dollar question, multi-million-dollar question. Have you all been able to put a price tag either on overall sea level rise funding, or even individual projects? What are y'all looking at for your for your city with a population of about 10,000? Is that right? About 10,000 people?
9,000 and change.
9,000 and change. Okay. Yeah. So what are they looking at in terms of money?
Well, I probably again, it's just the day-to-day stuff. I mean, we are still paying a debt on a stormwater system that we put in roughly 2010 plus or minus when we put the sewer system in. And I think that was the right thing. And honestly, as I look backwards, it wasn't necessarily the reason that we did it to protect ourselves against sea level rise or climate change. But, to the extent that we did it, we didn't do a curb and gutter project, but we did put in these trench drains and catch basins so that drains our streets. Well, that is in large context, a protection against rain, flood, tides. We're going to have to do more down the road as those things begin to become inundated with tide, as we have in the one you described in 39th through 42nd Street. So more and more we're going to have to do that. But those are protective measures that we've already taken. One of the things, the reason I lead into that and the cost associated and the debt we still owe is, frankly, we're still paying debt we owe. And to look forward using capital infrastructure money, which is typically gas tax money. Brian alluded to something on our agenda here, for next week. We've got a gas tax interlocal agreement with the county on that agenda. So we use those monies to fix roads, but we're still paying a debt backwards. And right now we're putting $50,000 a year into making sure we can repave our roads.
Okay.
And at the cost of repaving a road, which I can't give you a good number on, it's crazy. We're not putting nearly enough money away. And when you start elevating the roads too, and modifying stormwater systems to be able to handle it, and then as the county has started to do, think about what they're going to do to protect the neighbors on either side. Because the minute we elevate a road, there's more stormwater going into their property potentially, or to the extent that they're not supposed to be draining to our property. In reality, they probably do to a degree. And so you just created a barrier that water's not going to go either way.
Right, right.
We're going to create problems that we're going to have to be solving as we elevate roads.
And Brian, is there an overall plan? Like, do you have like a booklet that you call, Marathon Sea Level Rise, or is it more in a generalized planning document?
It's multifaceted. So we have the comprehensive plan, which has elements for climate change, sea level rise. Actually, we are planning on updating that next year to add additional items. Then we have the sustainability master plan as well. So that's focusing more on emissions of city vehicles and planning ahead for stuff like that. We have grants currently in with the state for next year to put in charging stations here at City Hall and over at Community Park. We also have a grant in to work towards a water reuse plan so that we are using less water, because as sea level rise increases, we may have saltwater intrusion into the aquifer, which then can limit how much fresh water we have to disperse. So it's multiple plans all going towards the same goal, and it's just referencing back and forth between all of them.
And I guess the county is looking at something like $1.6 billion. That's not including our municipalities. And so it is completely daunting.
I think that's, the number you just expressed is, whatever you ultimately come up with. When we did the wastewater master plan in late 90s, 2000, as I recall that number, it was $382 million. At this juncture, it's really been close to $1 billion.
Okay.
Stormwater, since it's a little more passive for the county, and now I'm speaking countywide.
Sure.
Stormwater, since it is a little bit more passively managed, maybe it's a little bit less expensive overall, but we certainly put our money into it in building the stormwater wastewater system we have. And for the city of Marathon and what we've got, that was probably, if you look at all the monies we've expended to date, it's probably $150 million project, including wastewater. When you look at canal restoration issues, that's always been considered to be $1 billion project. And so to think that climate change issues and elevating roads is going to be less than $1 billion, I think is billions, 9 zeros is absolutely what we're looking at, regardless of what the monies end up being. And I think that's probably the best way to characterize it, because if I started in 2000 at 380 million and we're now at $1 billion for wastewater, to put a number on it is just a good engineer's swag, but then it takes you 15 years to build it, and the costs increase. So 9 zeros is a good place to be looking.
And so I think now I'm going to let you wrap up with any statements that you'd like to make up regarding Marathon and its future.
I'll let Brian go first.
Well, one of the big things is I know this is a lot of technical information and a lot of the public does not follow us with this and come in and talk to us about this. So this is a great first step. Another thing that we did was we applied for grants from the Arts Council for the Art Builds community in the hope that we can create some art projects that address sea level rise as a talking point. So if we get that funding, that will be another way to start bringing that discussion forward. So it's all about our community coming together.
And I have to say, I gave Brian a little bit of a joking hard time about an arts project that advocates sea level rise awareness. But it's not a bad thing. We like it, and we've got a long way to go, and I think the city of Marathon is certainly going to do its part to address climate change. I think we have had the benefit of not having some of the low-lying areas that the county has had. And for a number of reasons, I think kind of water piles up in those areas that we've talked about in Key Largo, even that Key Largo is probably the highest elevation island. The lower Keys for the county is just they're low-lying. Marathon was filled a long time ago, so the places that are developed tend to be high enough to be secure for a while. But there's no question that we're going to have to address it. Areas are going to become worse as time goes on. And I think the thing we need to be particularly mindful of is spending our money wisely and prioritizing it, because there's a balancing act here. And I hate to put it in those terms, but there really is a balancing act. We're not going to be here forever. And, I will be here as long as I can be. If I die here, having retired here, I think that's certainly possible. In Brian's lifetime, we'll see. He's younger than I am. So, and in our kids' lifetime, that may be another story, because when you begin to look at these projections, to some extent, we're protecting ourselves to be able to stay here. And to some extent, we're protecting ourselves in our escape from here as sea level rise becomes more severe. And I hope this is seen. It's kind of a reality check in what I'm going to say, but we're going to do everything to be here as long as we can and protect our citizens. But I personally, I have an ex-wife that spent years seeing that land was bought in the Keys for the sake of habitat protection. And if you had a conversation with her today, having become a sea level rise advocate within her former job, I think she would start saying that we should buy our infrastructure back and start moving ourselves out. And so to some extent, it's that balance in trying to stay here in a financially viable way as long as we can to protect ourselves while we're here. But in a couple of generations, it's going to be very, very difficult.
I appreciate that a lot, because I have 2 sons, which I hope will get to enjoy the Keys lifestyle. And I agree with George that it's hard to predict. It's just hard to predict that. And to the degree we're able to enjoy it as long as we can. But we are doing things to protect our infrastructure, our homes, our roads, and that's a great thing. And I do appreciate the arts project as well. Anything to engage the community. And I know you all are good at that. I know you have participation at your council meetings. And any way we can reach the public is a good thing. So it looks like we're going low on time. So unless there's anything else anybody wants to add, I'll say thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you very much, Jill.
My pleasure. Thank you.